Is my spoon a bit too short for this? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel where we are discussing some interesting Hungarian true crime and mystery and conspiracy cases. And today we are going to talk about this crazy story of Pipás Pista, aka Stevie Pipes, or something like that. And brace yourself for the craziest plot twist that you have ever heard in your whole life. Again, the problem with covering Hungarian cases is that I have to translate some of the names so that it makes sense. So in English, the best I could translate his name is Stevie Pipes. Pipes as in like a pipe that you can smoke. You are going to see in just a second, so bear with me. By the way, if you have any ideas about my background or my lighting or any stories that you would like me to cover, let me know down in the comments. And let's get started. This story is set in the 1920s, 1930s Hungary, and it was post First World War, so the country was greatly impoverished, there was a lot of misery, especially in the countryside. And this story is set in a city called Szeged, which is a very famous and quite big city in countryside Hungary down at the south border. Depression, poverty, starvation wasn't a rare occurrence at this time in this place. Keep that in mind for the story. Near Szeged, there are lots of villages and towns where more and more men were found dead in their homes. But the police didn't really do much about this at the time because they all assumed that they were suicides. The men were found hanging from their ceilings in their own home, and because of the mental and emotional state of the country at the time, this was not a rare occurrence. A lot of people unfortunately committed suicide. However, in 1931, the local police got an anonymous letter from somebody stating that some of these mysterious suicides were actually murder for hire. So the police figured, okay, you guys, we probably should exhume some of these bodies that the letters claim were actually murdered victims. So they exhumed two of the bodies and they conducted an autopsy, and the truth was revealed. These men were actually strangled by hand, and then it was staged as a suicide. I wish I could tell you more information about who the victims were, how they died, why they died, but there I could find absolutely no information on them except for one. We don't even know how many victims there were, but we know that one of them was called Dobák Antal, a man who died 9 years prior to the police finding out that these were murders, so in 1923. According to this anonymous letter, the sister-in-law of this man, Antal, got him murdered because she, the sister-in-law, and her sister, so the man's wife, did not like this man very much. They thought of him as a good-for-nothing, weak, sickly man who could not even produce quality air, and besides, the wife had a side gig going on for her already. So they were like, let's get this man killed and everything is gonna be good, I guess. And the same source claimed that this man was killed in exchange for 2 sheep and 100 liters of wine. So based on all of the information that the anonymous letters claimed, the police was actually able to trace their killer quite fast, in just a couple of days or weeks really. And they found this man, now we know his name was Pipás Pista, hiding in the attic of one of his accomplices, one of the women that hired him for murder. While they are waiting for the trial to start, they take Stevie to jail. So his prison mates keep complaining that he stinks and smells like shit because he never bathes or showers in front of anyone or alone, because Stevie keeps claiming that he is allergic to water and his skin is going to shed like a snake if he takes a shower. So they take him to the jail doctor and they discover the truth. Like, brace yourself for the biggest plot twist. Stevie had been a woman this whole time. So you might be asking, how did this even happen? How was this possible? How did he or she pass so perfectly? From now on, I'm going to refer to her as she to keep the story more understandable. So she was born on the 23rd of February in 1882 in Szeged under the name Fődi Victoria. And she was the child of Fődi Lukács and Tombács Mária. And she grew up in a very impoverished, abusive household. Her father was a raging alcoholic and he always abused mentally, physically, sexually his whole family. By the time she was 13, the family became so poor that they decided to sell their daughter to a shepherd to live with him and work there as a maid. According to the sources, this is when she started smoking pipe, and that's where her nickname came from. This guy, the shepherd that now she lived with forcibly, regularly raped her. She even had a baby with this man as a result of the rape out of wedlock. So what this man, this piece of shit does is he now sends her to marry one of his acquaintances, a man who was 27 years older than her. We know that this man, his now new husband, is actually widowed, and he's also very abusive, and he regularly beat and raped her. But now she's bound to him by marriage. So she's 20 years old in 1902. She has only lived with abusive men. She knows nothing else from men. So naturally, she vows to revenge every alcoholic, abusive man that ever existed on the surface of this planet. She lived now in a town called Átokháza, which I'm only mentioning because of the meaning of the name. I could roughly translate it as the house of curse or the cursed house. Like, it's not a good name for a town, in my opinion, especially if you see what's gonna happen next in the story. Allegedly, she had 5 or 6 children with her now husband, but only one daughter survived, and she sent this poor daughter into an orphanage. Some sources say that she divorced her husband, others say that her husband died or something happened to him, but either way, by 1910, she lived alone in the ranch that she inherited from her grandparents. And what was notable about her is that she was extremely masculine, very muscular, tall, strong, robust body, and therefore she worked as a laborer. And I don't really know if she identified as a man because she was most likely illiterate. I highly doubt that she even knew what transgenderism was or such a thing existed. Most likely she only identified as a man in order to get a higher wage as a laborer, even though she was already twice as strong as the man. This is when her murders for hire started. Her clientele was mostly women that were miserable and suffered at the hands of their abusive husbands and wanted to get rid of them. Don't forget that during and after the war, women carried the whole country on their back and they just could not take this kind of shit anymore. This is pretty much all we know about her, is that she grew up in a miserable, impoverished, abusive household. She only knew abuse from men. She was always beaten, belittled. She didn't even fit a normal beauty standard. The next thing in line really could only be crime. I feel really bad for how her life turned out. So the trial finally began in 1933. The court hearing was so sensationalized that they sold tickets for what's worth like $420 in today's money, and the courtroom was filled to the roof. Like, people were sitting on the floor, some were fainting. They were all so excited to hear the outcome of the trial. So even though we don't know how many victims she actually had, she was charged for 2 murders officially. And initially she confessed to both murders. However, a few months later she retracted her statement, saying, "I don't feel guilty because I did not benefit from the murders." Which, like, okay, you didn't get money, but you got 2 sheep and wine. Like, good for you. That's a benefit, I think. And her attorney fought hard to get her acquitted from all charges as not guilty by reason of insanity, but this failed. On Friday the 13th, in January 1933, she was sentenced to death. And 6 of her accomplices were also sentenced to various lengths of time in prison. And some sensationalized media articles kept claiming that she did die and she was hanged with her own rope that she staged the suicides with. However, according to historical data, she was granted grace because the governor of Hungary at the time had the right to veto the court's decision. Because she wasn't the mastermind behind the murders and she only did it in exchange for food and drinks. Her sentence was changed to life in prison, but by that time she was on death row for 10 or 13 years. And in the end, she died in jail in 1940, most likely from complications of heart and lung disease. So, I don't really know what I think of this case. I can kind of understand how she ended up where she ended up. It's really sad that she had to endure this kind of abuse from men all her life. Her life really sucked, honestly, and she did not kill those men for personal revenge, or maybe she did. Maybe she really revenged every abusive man in the world. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think her crimes were justifiable? Do you agree or do you disagree? Do you think her sentence was too light or too harsh?